Awesome. And just to connect to that a bit, a lot of companies are trying to get started with using data in different ways and become data driven and have an understanding of all the KPIs that they have, etc. And we spoke a bit about this an analytical ladder that you can have in different steps in moving up in that ladder, and perhaps at some point reach the magical term of AI.
Now we are ready for AI. Not until now. We need to do this and this and this and this first.
Oh, it's one of my favorite topics.
Or worst topics.
Worst topics, yeah.
Okay, so what's your thinking about analytics versus AI?
Yeah, so people tend to confuse them. And the difference is with analytics, the goal is to get some information that you can act upon in an intelligent way.
Yeah.
And typically the process, the way it's done is that you try to centralize as much as the data that you can get hold of from your company, aggregate it, have a data science department that looks at it, data scientists that analyze it, and then they come up with a dashboard or with recommendations and things like that. This is super important. Companies should do it. So I'm not saying that analytics is not something one should do.
It's one discipline.
It's one discipline. It's a super important discipline. AI is something different. AI can be applied to analytics.
You can use machine learning or deep learning techniques when you do advanced analytics.
Yes. But AI is that, I think you in our conversation earlier, you expressed it pretty good. It's an engineering discipline.
Yes.
It provides a solution to something. It automates something. So what you get out is some sort of optimization or a business value or a cost reduction or things like that. And the great thing is that it does not have to be centralized. You don't have to wait to have all of your data lakes in place and all your data. Problems can be solved locally, and typically they are best solved by domain experts. Again, this difficulty of bridging the business understanding and AI. Say that you have say that you're an antenna designer at Ericsson. You worked with antennas for 40 years. And now here comes this newly graduated data scientist from the central data science department and says, you're building antennas. Would you like to add some AI to that? That's not going to work.
No.
The sort of domain knowledge that sits in that engineer is vastly bigger than what the data scientist can help with. And imagine also the poor data scientist. So one day he's talking to that antenna guys. Next day he's talking to the guys doing the billing.
And then marketing.
And the marketing, yeah. So it puts impossible demands on the data scientists. And yeah,
I guess it's the catch-22 problem of either you learn AI experts to know all the domains, or you learn domain experts to learn all of AI.
Yeah.
And both of those, I guess, is very difficult to solve.
I think ultimately, for me, this is easy to solve as soon as you recognize that this is a true team play. And it's not a team play where you can have two different organizations where you ping pong in between each other. You need to have a team play in a daily life over time, iterating, sweating, having blood on their shirt together. And then so it goes back to the whole organization. Do we put it centrally? Do we put it together with a domain expert? Organizational wise, there are many options, but work wise, blood, sweat, and tears together over time. And I think what I try to say here is that the domain expertise have their lingo, they have their understanding, they have their deep understanding, and here we have someone with mathematical or coding and all that kind of stuff. And these guys talk Python, these guys talk Latin. If I'm in a doctor AI for doctors, I used to joke like that. And to me, it's that simple. How do we find our common lingo? How do I, as a domain expert, fully understand the prerequisites for neural networks? What is the parameters when I can do a certain type of
So how do we solve this, Luka? Do we train the domain experts, or do we train the AI experts, or do we do neither, or do we do something else?
So I think a combination is needed. I think that a lot of things can be solved by training the domain experts.
Yes.
And then you need a layer of experts that can help out when things get difficult or things need validation and so on from the AI side. But you can get quite a lot by training domain experts. That's my.
And I guess the tooling can help a bit as well.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, you can bake in a a lot of the expertise in the tooling, and you can eliminate. But it's also, I mean, the state of AI today. I mean, you had Carl Tomé last week. What was he talking about? Kubernetes. Why was he talking about Kubernetes, which has absolutely nothing to do with machine learning and AI? Because it's something that he has to manage in order to do AI, and he shouldn't have, because it's not core to the problem he's trying to solve. And this wheel is being reinvented and requiring expertise that is, it's even beyond just the data science competence.
No, the stack as you to manage the full life cycle from idea to deployment and production takes you on a quite interesting journey.
Yeah,
tech-wise.
Exactly.
So what's your vision then? What do you think in like 5-10 years? What would you say that the best type of organization and company would be that can scale up use of data and AI in some way?
So that's a good question. I can give many examples that haven't worked, but I think some combination of where you have it also very much depends on the company. If you think, if we assume an engineer, technical heavy company, to simplify things, then I think the sort of approach that works is when you have a centralized center of excellence and data science department, and then you train all the engineers in using and building AMO, so that the engineers in the company in the different departments are sufficiently self-sufficient that they can handle a lot of stuff. And then when they need help, when they need more education and so on, they have this center of excellence that they can turn to and get support from.
And I've heard you use the term decentralized AI, and we're not speaking about federated learning right now or swarm learning or anything. What do you mean with the concept of decentralized AI?
Basically, that individual business units or even teams can solve a problem they have without having to involve the entire company and making it into a very heavyweight process. So we had an example of a company that produces industrial goods, and one of the sort of challenges was that they were in a big, or are still in a very big digitalization process, and the question was like, what can we do with AI? And one of the things that we came up with was that they have a production line where they inspect things for quality, and in that case, you can rig up cameras there. You can it can be solved by the local engineering team without to get the data to connect it, and with the right tooling and so on, it can be solved without making it into a massive process, but rather making it rather quick. The downside of that is, of course, that if you keep doing that for 10 years with everybody running their own AI solutions and not doing anything about the data, is that you'll end up with a mess eventually. So there needs to be a feedback loop to some sort of centralized bit.
Cool. So I think this is one of the key challenges of also how to go about this, how to get started without blowing up in a huge project, but at the same time have a learning organization or a feedback loop. So this is I think one of the key topics, how to crack that nut. I think there is another key nut to crack, and that is the fundamental orchestration topic. I mean, like we have different stakeholders in terms of who owns the P&L and what's the business perspective. Then we have an engineering perspective. Then we have a data perspective. So also how we work, and we are not used to these cross-functional setups that is, in my opinion, required. So even if you go and find this problem now and you can solve it locally, it's still fairly, the many different parts or competencies or different functions within that business unit that need to come together to make that actually a good deployment in production that is used on everyday basis. Because it's not only about rigging that whole and getting that data to work. Well, how are you going to get it back into the normal daily workflow, and who is the boss of that, and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a strong case for the future especially if you talk about product companies and so on, that have some sort of agile workflow and cross-functional teams, to add data scientist or machine learning engineer as a part of that team.
I think that's a good one.
But the problem today with that is that there is such a massive gap. And data science, especially with the complexity of tools, it's not like you can have one data scientist to build, unless it's Carl Tomé, who's amazing, can build an entire production system and platform in place locally. And that's also why data scientists typically work in teams today and as a coherent unit. So I think you run into a lot of trouble there with just adding a data scientist and having just this sort of technology with the technological complexity that is there today.
And a little bit, that's part of the whole pilot graveyard, that we have done exactly that. And they were able to figure something out in their notebook based on their CSV file.
Yes.
But the rest of that story is not covered.
Exactly.
Yeah. It comes back. It comes back to this.
Yeah.
But it's
difficult things.
But are there any? So did we boil down this to any guiding idea? What was the fundamental? We understand the problem deeper and deeper and deeper. But do we have good, simple guiding principles on this, or is that basically very contextual for each company?
So it is very sort of each time when I think that's like now we've cracked the formula for enterprise, then you sort of meet another company. For instance, the model I presented there, like for an engineer heavy company, it completely falls apart if you have a company that consists of people who are not engineers but non-technical. Large company has tons of non-technical people. Departments, and then you're suddenly okay. Either we inject technical people there, but you can't really, because in this particular case, this was a very decentralized organization where each unit has a lot to say and have their own business goals and so on. So it's sort of in those cases, it has to be start as a central initiative, and then over time that you try to work yourself to.
So it's about context, it's about size, it's about maturity, it's about the opportunity of data literacy or engineering literacy.
Exactly.
That basically it's a smorgasbord of things you can do, but it's a little bit like we need to pick a starting point that is relevant for these.
And then also one of the other things is that AI can typically strike at the center of a company, of a sort of core of the business. And there is a decision to be made there, which is like, do we do this ourselves, or do we hire a consultancy firm or use a vertical AI company's product and so on? And that very much depends on sort of what the goal of the company is. If it's just a service company, then it makes sense to use off-the-shelf things as simple as possible, replaceable products. Just try to hobble something together as cheaply as possible and do it like that. Well, if you have a goal of building value in the company, so if you want to go more to the product as a service or something like that, then you have to start making sure that you actually own the IP to the things that you do, because otherwise the software that you're using that's generic will be used by all of your competitors, and you won't have any IP.
So this is a quite interesting topic. We had a Mikael Klingvall here. He's a data scientist at Vattenfall. I used to work at Vattenfall before, and I think this is one of those fundamental topics. What is our core business in the future? And we always talked about this in Vattenfall, that actually the algorithm of the wind farm optimization is our core IP. So when we had discussions with Siemens, we should we outsource? They wanted us to do stuff, or we manage it for you, buy our software, and we were flipping it around. No, we don't want to buy a black box out of you. We might want to buy algorithms of you, but we want to run that in our data center because we have other data. And by the way, we are trying to do return on capital employed maximize best maintenance. So I'm not only looking at the turbine vibration, I'm also trying to schedule,
Right.
based on how I can sell and price my energy, which you can't do. So I think this is core what you're saying now, because it also means a little bit to take a step back now we like our Elon Musk first principle. So if I take a company like Vattenfall, is AI even part of their first principle business? I think it is. If they are ultimately here to produce energy to sufficiently optimized, it's a core cost.
You have to find the correct level of abstraction. If you say like, should Vattenfall build a cloud of its own?
No,
called Ånga. And
Steam cloud.
Steam cloud. No, but should it like?
That's true. So where do they draw the line? What is core?
Exactly.
So maybe the tooling is not core, but the algorithm is core.
Exactly.
Is core.
But
I agree with that. I fully agree with that.
What's the sort of the curse of the vertical AI company? And we've seen this a bunch of time. Like for example, we work with an insurance company where they wanted to do some car damage assessment, I think it was. Anders, perhaps you know better. But basically, our first initiative was to push them towards. There is a company that does this, Tractable, that does it really well. It's like, well, why are you talking to us? Why do you want to reinvent the wheel? Like, go with Tractable. They are really great at this stuff. But they were like, no, this is our core business. We want. Even if what you build will be inferior to what they do, it will be ours. So it will be our crap. So it won't be somebody else's.
Oh my god!
So it's
interesting.
But if you want to build, I mean, there is a risk if you just pick and choose different AI services. I'll take this from Google, this from Microsoft, and so on, and just connect everything. Is that ultimately you haven't built any value yourself? You're just using services that are required to run your business, but you don't actually create any added value in the business.
It's a patchwork of different systems or something.
That as well, yeah.
Cool. Before we move too much into that, we have a lot of topics we'd like to cover, and speaking about the Corona situation of today and how to reboot companies and whatnot. But before we move into that, and perhaps AI for good, that I know you are very passionate about as well. I don't think we closed really the lid on what Peltarion really is and what the vision is nowadays. How would you describe the vision of Peltarion?
So it's on your T-shirt.
Sorry. Oops. Okay. So try to elaborate a bit more, perhaps.
So the vision, which is sort of where we see the world, where we want to see the world. To end up is AI being ubiquitous and doing good for humanity. Yeah, basically. And why do we want that? Well, because it's much better than AI doing bad for humanity. I think we decided.
Sounds like a good idea.
But there is a massive potential in this technology, and it will be transformative, and it will be great if it can be used to make the world a better place. The way we're doing it is basically, and that's more of our mission, is to make AI accessible and affordable for all. And
not just for the tech giants. But
exactly, not only for the tech giants. I should qualify that a bit, sort of where we are at this level, because I remember there was an interview in some British newspaper, and they used the analogy of WordPress for AI. Like, before WordPress, you had to write things in HTML, and it was just a few web developers who could do it. But then WordPress came, and anybody could do web pages. And I said, exactly like that. And then we got these pissed off emails like, I know how to use WordPress, but I tried to use your platform and I couldn't. So it's directed at still today at people with a level of technical skill, sort of engineers, developers.
So who's the target user as Peltarion platform is today?
So the technical non-data scientists. We usually
software engineer.
we usually say engineers and developers, but it's a broader. So this could be we've had one of the most active users of our platform is a medical company with medical people using it. But it's always some degree of technical knowledge behind it. But it doesn't have to be AI knowledge or data science knowledge. And that's
awesome.